Hey, hi. I was watching this video recently and it explained the function of the foot, and it's quite dry, and I'll put a link somewhere below. Um, but it just got me thinking to look into the foot a little bit deeper. Um, I tried to do it anyway, but then I realized I've seen a foot like this at the osteopath, and I just thought I'll ask if I can borrow it. So the other day I received a call from the receptionist to tell me that it was okay to borrow his foot. So here it is. This is nothing medical, and I don't have any medical background. It's just trying to apply common sense to what I see and feel and how I experience things. And I think it can be possibly helpful for people or even therapists, because it's I think often the case that we struggle to communicate what we feel, and therapists base whatever they do on, yes, what they studied, but also what they see movement wise, and the eye catches the bigger movement, and there's a lot we struggle to explain. And I see the arm, for example, like one whole object from shoulder to hand, and same with the leg from lower back hip to the foot. But you can almost think of the foot or the hand of a larger mechanism like that. And we just don't seem to be approaching it that way. So here are just some experience and thoughts I thought I'll document for myself mainly, as it will be harder to recall, I think, over time, hopefully. And it's all these things we take for granted. One of the first things I experienced was the spasticity, kind of curling the foot together like that and bending the toes. And you get this kind of foot that kind of shapes this way and tilts outwards. And now looking at this, I realized that all these bones, you can see that these bones on the inside here kind of start to interlock if you make them tight, which makes it really hard for this to bend. So you end up walking out on the outside of the foot, and as the hip is weak, you kind of, your foot basically slides outwards. Maybe I can introduce Frank here. Oops, I have to go a little bit higher. This is Frank. So we end up standing on our uninvolved leg, and come on, sliding away that way, or worse. Might have to get that stand for it. Sliding away that way. If you take this foot by itself, you can see that it's angled. Well, it ends up being angled like that. So you angle, you slide away from your body, and as you try to hold, you kind of press more on that side angle. But as the foot drops, because that's the other issue, the foot drop, the toes are the first point of contact, and they kind of go up, up. So it's a reaction almost like you're walking on glass, which stiffens everything's up further up the chain. The other thing as well, that because this is weak, it makes contact and collapse, and then it drops inwards to find support, but it can't find support, so the body pushes up into the ankle, which is already stiff, and then the whole chain goes. I can't find support here, so it's being pushed up into the knee, into the hip, trying to keep the body upright, which creates a real stiff leg quite often. Stick to the foot. Yeah, so over time, I feel that those bones were, they kind of lock in here. So quite often, just like the hand, we try to stretch out the toes and the fingers. But if you put stuff between the toes, everything spreads out and becomes a more grounded shape. But if you allow it to curl in, it kind of slides. You can see that it collapses in, but as soon as you take the toe out and get those toes spread, it becomes a more supported shape and brings the ankle in. Because quite often you will notice, well, I noticed that, and it's still that the ankle kind of tilts inwards, which I'm trying to work on. So one of the first things I was happy, even when I was still wearing an AFO, but I was particularly happy when I was able to get out of my AFO, but I squeezed this in my AFO. So it's a half insole, and because it doesn't have the support from the shoe, it probably is going to tip over here. Yeah, you can see it tips over, but if it's supported here, you can see that it's already helping the foot to stand better. And at the moment, I found that I'm even slightly better on these, which are slightly higher in here. You can see that they're just slightly higher in that area there. But they have a little higher space here as well. So they give me a slight forward tilt, which helps with your, to prevent knee extension. But you can see that it's better supported this way. The other thing, if in walking in general, if you don't have that, everything kind of collapses in the middle at some point, because at first it's very tight, and as the tone was disappearing, everything kind of collapsed, and so the tone is still triggering a little bit of toe bend there, and it's creating tension through here, just like the hand to the knuckles, but there's not enough strength in the toes to actually support me there. So at first you got the collapse, and then you kind of get a slappy feel in your foot, because it's not, the foot itself is not holding your body as structure, so you kind of lean backward a little bit to balance off and really walk on your heel, rather than getting in the standing phase that transition forward and through the foot. And I think this helps, because you lift the arch instead of allowing it to collapse, and you kind of collapse and walk, get a sidewalk walk. Also, because if you got a bit of a leg swing, you swing from the outside, and then it drops on the outside like that, and it collapses inwards and transfers to the hip. So if you got a rounding, it kind of creates a seesaw effect of getting on it and getting over it and launching you forward, which makes it easier to get a gait. The other thing I have done is put tape in the front of my shoe. So instead of when it curls up, it has it doesn't catch on the insole, but slides out. And also when you walk, even if your toes curl, they're kind of under pressure, they have the room to slide out because of the tape. Yeah, I think that's a really important one as well, that because this locks up, one of the key things to do is to get mobility in the foot. And there's a couple of spaces, a couple of things. I think, and I started doing this by myself for some reason, and then actually found it later on in videos from Tara Tobias as well. So it was nice to see that confirmed. But the tone in the foot, kind of collapsing the foot that way, kind of starts making that a normal position for the body. So to remind it to get that feeling in your body, to really is really important, I think. But you can also see that it helps to get the mobility through that area. Because if your ankle is pushing that way, you're pushing down into the foot, which is a more natural way of exiting your standing phase in your walk. So that helps, the ramp helps to stretch that, and I spent a lot of time on it. The other thing when I'm using it is quite often to put weight on top, because it really helps the nerves to, things to be pushed out between here, because it takes away that rounded shape here. So even if you're standing on the ramp, it's still there. Where if you add weight, you kind of spread out the bones, and you can feel it in the nerves. So the more the nerves get used to that position, the less it's triggered to respond and make it easier to stand on it. The other thing for mobility is, I think, important to only use it halfway and kind of get the motion through the foot in that direction. So I stand on it that way and stretch it that way, and in my toes that way, and it stretches everything out. It's just like a little fan. And you find it similar in the hand, that its hand is like, quite often people work just to extend the fingers, but if you look at my palm, you need the width there, where my other hand, it's still rounding here, there. So to work on spreading that, so even if I'm putting weight on it, usually on top of it, I try to manually manipulate it to open that, the bones closer to my wrist. The other thing, what I'm experiencing at the moment quite often is, even though I start to walk putting my foot straight, it feels, well, previously I had a rotation in my leg, which is a lot better, and I help it with hip rotation straps, and also a strap to lift my foot a little bit more. So it helped me a little bit of dorsiflexion without actually locking down my ankle. And I really like the NRX strapping from Material for that, because it's the inside has I don't have a piece of hand. The inside creates friction on your skin, which gives you kind of neurofeedback. And I think that's a really important part of it. So it's not just working on pulling, but it creates friction, which gives you feedback through your body. And it has a nice stretch to it. So I'm using one which goes, you've seen it on in my shoe now, and I started out with a more rigid version, and you can just change the construction as you go, which I think is really handy because your walking changes. And now it still allows me to push off, and then it helps me to be more responsive in the dorsiflexion. But what I'm experiencing now is that even though as soon as my foot gets off the ground, I get a little flick in a swing, and then bring it back straight. But as I land, I probably still land quite flat and not on my heel. But it feels, if I put my foot like that I'm actually standing like that, and like you're walking with your toes pointing forwards, which I'm not. I filmed it and it's not the case, but what I think is happening is that I'm standing, getting support through my heel, and then more through my big toe now, but not enough on the smaller toes, because this one is the most crook at the moment and the weakest, which feels, well, this one is always hardly anything. But what I think is happening then is that you get strength in your heel and in your big toe, but not through the other ones. So you end up going down and then kind of collapse a little bit sideways, which makes the feel of that angle in your body, because your leg basically in the down cycle comes and then rotates that way, if that makes sense. So my aim now is to strengthen these, and I just trying to stretch it and mobilize it and move it and tape it and the toe sleeves and stuff to it to kind of engage the toe, and just try to massage these things, and I got acupuncture on it and massages, and I'm really strangely responding if you touch these areas here with massages. It's quite sensitive between there and kind of shoots shivers down my spine. And we started experimenting with tuning forks, especially around here. So there must be nerves running there or something, and it really sends all kinds of signals through. One thing as well with the ramp, found to push, stand on it, and that kind of feels like it's mobilizing my foot to stand on it that way. And now with this foot, I kind of starts to make sense where that spot is, and I can see this bone here. So it kind of mobilizes this area here, which makes it easier afterwards to have my foot, instead of standing like on that side edge, to kind of get this flat and grounded, because there's more mobility in this area. It's quite nice to stand on the the balance cushion as well and change the pressure from there to there to there, and then to the toes to bend them over. One stretch I recently started doing as well is to use the ramp and put another one in front, and you can see that it still doesn't bend that way. It's usually still, the tone basically is like that. So to put some weight on it, you should put weights on this very spot there, and it kind of stretches things out, because the pressure itself wouldn't be enough. And just putting weight down here over it, and on the toes for sensation really helps. And it of course helps me to walk and push off, because that's the thing I'm struggling with a little bit, and quite often it's helpful while walking to do a bit of stretching on the sidewalk or something and stretch those toes out. Yeah, this is just me thinking out loud and trying to figure out what I'm experiencing, because unfortunately normally in therapy it's just not something there's a lot of time for usually. See, this is probably, if you stretch this out, you probably get more space in here as well, so it just allows the arch to move more freely. And if you stretch it against stuff, you really feel the nerves under here and along the toes to kind of stretch out. And of course you do a lot of calf stretching. On here as well. So there's a combinations of things you can do on that, and I think it's really important. I don't get why they don't just make a ramp or two part of the standard rehab kit. You know, if they include it as a kit, it's costing them nothing. If every patient just gets themselves a ramp. It's something you preferably have two of even. I have two, and one is next to my standing desk and one is in lounge. And for a while one was next to my bed, just to stand and stretch. If I'm watching TV, then I'm usually have my foot on it. Just put my foot on it and put some weight on top, or like this halfway, and it just stretches things, and the weight as well gives me more neurofeedback of where my body is and my foot, and it just establishes the connections. And you can really feel the difference if you've been sitting on this a while or standing on it and then get off it. Your foot just feels so much, well, my foot just feels so much more grounded. And of course, I wouldn't walk without this now. Normally, I generally have flat feet, so so this helps stabilize. But what I do think is important, that they have a reasonable, you don't even need that foamy bit, but a reasonably firm heel cup, so they keep your ankle a bit more stabilized. And if your ankle is more stable, then your knees straighter up, because that's the thing as well. See people and myself, if I go down and my other leg stays stable, but my affected side, which is my left side, unfortunately only had the right foot, kind of collapses in, which also makes, as you can see, your lower leg collapse in, which means your knee is collapsing in. and because the front is collapsing, you probably you try to stand up straight because you feel you're falling forward, so you're pushing up, and then your knee extends, which kind of blocks your hip off, and then your hip blocks off, but then the hip flexors are weak, so you kind of rotate out, and then try to pull your hip up to clear the ground. So it's always a chain reaction. Why do I think it's important? It's like we focus a lot on walking and clearing the ground, but we need to recover these muscles, and AFOs help to overcome some of that. But for me, it's really important to gain that movement and stability. So I need to stretch and engage it. And it's getting better, but it's a slow process. So the sooner we start, the better. And watch those toes. I think, I started off with toe dividers, and I've gone through a few other steps now. One thing I think is that neurologically maybe, or maybe it's another cause, when this all pulls together and kind of starts curling in like that, I think the brain struggles to see the individual parts and therefore struggles to control them. And regular toe dividers are all connected, so it kind of pulls, it does divide the toes, but then it still makes it one object. So I prefer individual sleeves at the moment, where there's still movement between the toes and it's easier to move them independently. But there's more awareness that they are individual toes rather than one together. I think you really have to watch that big toe in general, of course, with tight shoes and that, etc. That toe kind of moves inward, which affects your balance because you kind of fall in. So it's important to pull it out. You can do that with an object. But I do like, I use kinetic tape and put it on the inside here, and also do it on the outside. And if you look it up, you can find it as bunion taping, because it opens up the toe and prevents bunions on the toe here. I think that's it. That's me thinking out loud, and hopefully document it for myself to kind of look back at it, and maybe it helps you to think through the process, because I do think that's part of it, that the more we understand it, the easier it is to solve our problems. Understanding the problem is half the solution. So hopefully it's useful to you as well. But yeah, hopefully it made sense. Bye.